So, here's a question for everybody. What the hell were these things? Yeah, at the end of Thriller Bark, if you don't remember, because it was only like one scene in the anime, and when I say it was like one scene, I mean like one scene. Like, maybe a few seconds. In the manga, I think it was only like 2 or 3 panels, and that was it. But at the end of the Thriller Bark arc, when the Straw Hats are sailing away from the Devil's Sea, the Florian Triangle, Lola just kind of looks off into the distance, and in the foggy mire of the Florian Triangle, there's this wall of haze just surrounding Thriller Bark. In the distance, you could see these large, shadowy, pillar-like beings. And one of them has red eyes that just glares, and then the narrator has this really creepy narration over it that's just like, ships go missing, every year in the Florian Triangle, and there's all these mysteries abound in the Devil's Sea. And a lot of people liken it to Thriller Bark because Moria set up shop in the Florian Triangle, but he set up his ship 10 years ago. And the narrator explains that mysteries were abound long before that, hundreds of years before Moria came around with Thriller Bark. There were some mysterious goings-on and disappearances in the Florian Triangle. Now, for one thing, I really like that Oda did this, even though we have no idea what these things are. It's interesting that he threw that in there, because after the Straw Hats, show up at Thriller Bark and they beat the crap out of Moria, and the Mysterious Four are kind of all disbanded afterwards, after that, it just seems like, oh, well, that's all the mystery. All the mystery's been drained out of it. All the horror element of Thriller Bark, it's been ruined. But no, that's not the case. There's a lot of other unsolved mysteries that are in this place. Now, I've always been a big fan of Thriller Bark, and I think that could be likened to the fact that I'm a big horror movie fan. Obviously, Oda took a lot of inspiration from horror movies and other stories. Michael Jackson's Thriller, even, with the zombie dance. A lot of the stereotypes, a lot of the cliches from a lot of old horror movies appear in Thriller Bark. You got the walking, talking skeleton. Oda modded that a little bit by adding the afro and the rock and roll aspect there. You also got giant mutated spiders, which are similar to like the B-movies of the 1950s. You got vampire bats like Hedon. You got an invisible man like the movie Invisible Man. You got a ghost girl. You got whatever the hell Moria is. You got giants. You got a oddly attractive, sexy zombie dancer girl. I'm not the only one that had fantasies about Sindri, right? Please tell me I'm not. Oh, so hot. Anyway, okay. But something that is interesting about the giant monolithic, creatures in the distance, though, is just how freaking massive they are. Keep in mind, Thriller Bark is like the biggest canon pirate ship in the story. Now, I say canon because later on when we get to the New World in the movie Film Gold, you have Gran Tesoro, which is this giant vessel that's also a casino and basically a city on a ship. So I'm pretty sure that's kind of bigger than Thriller Bark, but maybe not. But in terms of like the canon, yeah, Thriller Bark is an island that was converted into a pirate ship. And look at the scale of this thing. Alright, look how big these giant creatures are in the mist, even though we can't see them all too well, just their shadows, compared to the size of Thriller Bark. They're just massive. So that got me thinking, like, alright, well, let's go through the One Piece story, and let's see what, like, the biggest creatures there are, to see if we have something to compare them to. Now, before the Zou arc, our standards were basically just, like, San Juan Wolf, who is the largest giant. We also had Wadatsume, who's an Umibozo, who's even bigger, I believe. You had the Kraken, which was, I think, slightly smaller than Wadatsume, but still pretty damn massive there. You have the Sea Kings, which are varying in size. There's all these different types of Sea Kings, but they're also pretty damn big. Big enough to basically cover up the sky of Fishman Island, which is in of itself a huge thing. I think a lot of people sometimes forget just how big Fishman Island is. I mean, the thing is big, and like millions of fishmen and merfolk live there. So the thing is, like, it's massive down on the bottom of the ocean. But anyway, yeah, a lot of big things in One Piece, but none of them quite compare to this kind of scale. Until you get to the Zou arc when Zunisha is introduced. Zunisha being the giant long-legged elephant that has the entire country of Zou on its back. And also, you don't want to undersell the size of Zou. We don't really get a exact, like, scale of how big the mink tribe is. Like, I don't think there's millions of minks living on the back of Zunisha, but certainly in the thousands. I mean, it's an actual realized country with a full, culture, and everything's set up. You got a forest back there, you got towns. So yeah, it's a country on this elephant's back. And in terms of just straight up height, Zunisha is obviously the tallest because not just like the elephant body itself, is huge. It like dwarfs any kind of ship approaching it, but you also have to figure that its legs are long enough to reach all the way down to the ocean floor, and that's how it walks. So, yeah, I mean, it's obviously the tallest, and when you're comparing the size, Zunisha's size to these shadowy Thriller Bark figures, they're not that different. The size seems to be about the same. Now, we don't know if these shadowy figures stretch all the way down to the ocean floor, or if they're just kind of floating. We don't know exactly the layout here. We don't even know what they really look like. I believe Joy Boy did a video about this a year ago, and he really, compared like, oh, well, look at Zunisha, look at these things. There might be an entire race of these elephants in the Florian Triangle. I can't exactly say that's impossible. One of Zunisha exists, like Zunisha's species, and Oda actually did give a name to the species of Zunisha, but it's like, it starts with an N, but it's something I can't think of. I'll just throw it up down here. It's a very long name. But yeah, that's like the name of the actual species of the elephant, Zunisha. So, yeah, it could be those things as well. However, I just don't think the shadows look right. Now, it would be one thing if you have these shadowy figures. So far, we only have 3 of them, and you could say that those were the legs of an elephant like Zunisha, and maybe there's like a 4th one that's just in the distance, we didn't see it, but like these 4 pillars in the shadows of the mist, and then the elephant body is on top. That would be one thing, except we saw the eyes of one of them glow, so we can assume that they're shaped like like a pillar, and then the head, the eyes are on the top of said pillar. And if that's the case, it wouldn't be an elephant. Right, so even though I don't think it's like the same kind of elephant like Zunisha, I still find it really fascinating that there are other species, other creatures or monsters, whatever terminology you want to use, that are as large as Zunisha in the world of One Piece. And it makes perfect sense. And Oda was doing a thing where it's like every time we think we ran into like a large creature in One Piece, he would always one-up it. Like, we ran into the giants, like Dory and Broggy, and we're like, wow, okay, these things are pretty big. And obviously we've had the Sea Kings. And giants were, like, Dory and Broggy both killed Sea Kings, so that kind of gives you an idea for scale there. But then later on, during Thriller Bark, we get introduced to Oars, who is this giant amongst giants that's like the size of like 4 giants stacked up on top of each other. And then later on, during Marineford, we get the introduction of Zan Juan Wolf, who is the great battleship, who's large enough to even dwarf Oars and Oars Jr. hiding behind the Marineford HQ. So, yeah, and then, of course, then we get to Wadetsume, who can balloon up even higher, and then the Kraken. So Oda was like, oh, no, you think that's how big they get? No, man, they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and you knew that joke was coming a mile away, didn't you? By the way, we're going to be bringing up Shirahoshi in a minute because I want to talk about ancient weapon theories, but while doing research for this, did you know, it's not around anymore, at least I don't think it is, but back in 2012, like a giant, like, life-sized replica of Shirahoshi was made, and was a slide in Japan, so you could, like, walk up Shirahoshi. There was, like, stairs to walk up right in front of her giant chest, and then her tail was the slide. I feel so bad that probably doesn't exist now, and I'll never get a chance to go down on that. Okay, I just felt like that you should know that information, because when I found out about it, I'm like, people need to know that this existed at one point. Maybe it still does, I don't know. Just another reason for me to go to Japan. But anyway, yeah. So, let me talk about what I think these things are. Because I was doing a little bit of, a little thought, little, headcanon nonsense, and I'm like, okay. We know that Oda takes a lot of inspiration from various mythology, and various movies and things of that nature. Like, look at just Wadatsume. Wadatsume is an umebozo, something from Japanese mythology. The giants are very much rooted in Norse mythology. Same thing with the Kraken, something that originates from Norse mythology. And here's the thing. Wouldn't it be cool? I'm just gonna say it. Cthulhu. Cthulhu or Godzilla? Okay, let me just... I know what you're thinking, like, no, Tekking, no, it's not Godzilla. No, seriously, just think about it for a second, though, okay? Oda, you know, he takes references from movies all the time. In fact, Wano, he's come out and said that there's gonna be, like, a shit ton of references to, like, old school samurai movies in Wano. And he's taken, like, he used Michael Jackson's Thriller, he used as a reference for the "everybody zombie time, round and round until you die, everybody zombie time." You know, he used that as a basis for it. So don't fucking come to me and tell me for a freaking second that Oda would not include one of the most iconic, no screw it, the most iconic kaiju monster in One Piece. He would totally do it. It wouldn't actually be called Godzilla. It might be changed up a little bit, the design. But just in terms of, like, I want these things to be massive and huge. I want these things to be beyond our main characters. I don't want these things to just be standard sea kings or standard sea monsters. That's what the sea kings kind of are. They're just, like, basic designs from, like, you know, leviathans or, like, just standard sea serpents and things like that. No, I want these things to be, like, so massive that, like, no character could be able to fight against them. Maybe that's just me trying to be all hopeful and stuff, but I would really like, you know, some sort of, like, ancient creature, you know, beyond, like Kaido couldn't scratch these things. Whitebeard could not scratch these things. Like, it just goes beyond humans. That's what these things are. That's what I want them to be. They might not be that, but that's what I want them to be. And and Godzilla, granted it's been a long time since I've seen the original Godzilla from 1955, I believe is when it was made. The original black and white Godzilla. But if memory serves, wasn't Godzilla a product of, like, nuclear war? And, because obviously this was, you know, after, like, 10 years after World War II, and the whole incidents with Hiroshima and Nagasaki kind of were the inspiration for Godzilla. But wasn't Godzilla a creature that emerged from the ocean? Like, he rose up out of the Pacific Ocean and attacked Japan? Like, wasn't that his origin because of, like, the nuclear fallout? So, water-based creature, yeah, sure. Giant lizard thing. And there's more than one of them. There's more than one, because we saw multiple shadows. So, I'm just throwing it out there. Godzilla would be cool. Now, my other idea is Cthulhu. Cthulhu, from H.P. Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu, not just one book, there's multiple books in this series, and H.P. Lovecraft crafted a bunch of different gods, not just Cthulhu. Cthulhu is kind of like the most famous one, but there's other ones as well. There's the Deep one, there's the Crawler, I think there's one that's really creepy thing. They all have really hard to kind of pronounce names. Cthulhu is also kind of hard to pronounce, but I think he just you know, seeped his way into pop culture so much that everyone just kind of knows what Cthulhu is. Cthulhu is this giant, great old one, a tentacle monster, basically. Like, his face is like a squid, he's got the tentacles everywhere, which I'm looking at these, I'm like, hey, if this is going to be a basis off the Cthulhu mythos, these things could all be tentacles, that thing could be its eyes, like its main body could be tentacles just spraying everywhere. You know, it is an anime, so tentacle hentai. No, but seriously. And another little parallel to this that I thought would be interesting. Look at Thriller Bark. Thriller Bark was a lot of stuff, like I said, based off of old school monster movies, like The Walking and Talking Skeleton, The Invisible Man, Absalom, you know, creepy ghosts and stuff. Wouldn't it be a really interesting parallel if Oda took references from, like, modern stories, like horror movies, and incorporated that and the thriller thing into Thriller Bark as sort of just, like, the facade, like, that people think, like, oh, that's why the Florian Triangle is so dangerous, because of Thriller Bark. But Thriller Bark was revealed to be just a manufacture, something created by Moria. But then you move the curtain and it turns out, no, there is something much more ancient, much more powerful, much more devastating beyond your wildest comprehension that's lurking behind the scenes. Sort of like how a lot of movies take references from mythology. And that's where you get a lot of stuff now in film and in books, taken from stories that were told thousands of years ago as a basis. So it would be really interesting if that was the case. Cthulhu is also one of the gods that H.P. Lovecraft created that's like a water-based god. Because the story with, just to give you a brief rundown, and I admit I'm not an expert on this in any way, but to give you a rundown, H.P. Lovecraft creates all the great old ones, these gods, that essentially ruled over the earth, but then something happened and they basically just went into a deep slumber. And that's where they are right now. And something else is that there's the city of R'lyeh, this submerged city in the ocean where Cthulhu is purported to, like, rise up after his slumber has ended. And H.P. Lovecraft actually gave a specification on where R'lyeh is located, and it's located at a place in the South Pacific called Point Nemo. And it's Latin for just no one. And the reason it's called that is because Point Nemo, it's not an island, it's just an actual geographical point in the middle of the ocean. And the reason it's called no one is because it's the furthest place from civilization that you could go on the entire planet. Like, if you want to go somewhere that's like the furthest away from any other island, any other human, go to Point Nemo. It's like 1,600 miles in any direction. There is just fucking nothing. There's no islands, there's no humans, it's just nothing. It's just water. And then that's where he placed, like, the great city of R'lyeh. So it's kind of similar to the Florian Triangle, to the Devil's Sea. Aside from Thriller Bark, which was the only island we saw there, there was nothing else in the Devil's Sea. And Thriller Bark wasn't naturally in the Florian Triangle. Moria, it was from the West Blue, and more. Here's a question for you. If you guys could answer this, you're my new best friends. Because this is one thing in One Piece that I just cannot wrap my head around. How did the freaking island Thriller Bark get from the West Blue to Paradise? Because look at this map here, okay? The West Blue is here, and then you have the red line, and then you have the Florian Triangle, which is located on, like, the right side, like, basically on the exact opposite side of the world. And it's not Reverse Mountain. Don't just say they took Thriller Bark over Reverse Mountain. That is bullshit. The opening of Reverse Mountain, how you get up on that thing, is relatively narrow. Ships have a hard time getting up that damn thing. Like, the Mary almost crashed up against the side. There is no fucking way that you're getting an entire damn island up Reverse Mountain and then down into Paradise and then I guess sailing Thriller Bark all the way through Paradise. You know, no one noticing it until you finally get to Thriller Bark and then park it there. Like, alright, this seems like a good place to set up our operation. You explain how that happened! How do you get from here to here? I don't know. The only other idea I have is they attached a bunch of balloons to it, floated it through the sky, and then dropped it on. That's the only other explanation I got. Yeah. Although I will say another thing really quick. It was stated that Moria went to the New World at one point, and that's how he got defeated by Kaido, and he got all traumatized. So, I guess it's possible that he went from the West Blue to the New World first. That would still mean he would have to cut through the Calm Belt, and then the New World itself. Got his ass kicked by Kaido, and then somehow get Thriller Bark, I guess. They coat the entire freaking island and then send it through Fishman Island and get back. It's just... I just don't get it. It's just such a conundrum to me. Oda probably never will explain it. It's probably something that really you're not supposed to think that much into. It would have made a lot more sense if he would have made Thriller Bark from the South Blue or the East Blue, but I'm going off on a rant about that. I apologize. Right. So, yeah, the idea behind the whole Cthulhu thing and the Godzilla thing, that's just my idea. Something that might play a role into the actual story. I think everyone's always going to jump to the ancient weapons. We always want to know more about the ancient weapons, right? So we have Pluton, which is the, world-destroying battleship. No idea where that's located. Then we have Shirahoshi, who's Poseidon, who has the ability to command Sea Kings. I would be very disappointed if these things just turned out to be regular Sea Kings. Kings. I mean, the silhouette of them, because the Sea Kings shape and size, they vary so much, it could very well be a Sea King, but I really hope it's not, just because that would be kind of lame. If they are Sea Kings, Oda, you better make them, like, these might be, like, the most demonic, basically, like, the Great Old One designed, like, Sea Kings. Like, these are the Mother, King, Queen Sea Kings that were, like, the largest ones in the entire world. If you're gonna do something like that, like a special subspecies, you know how, like, there's giants, like on Elbaf, like, with Kashi and Oimo and Bragi and Dori and Hyrudine, but then you get, like, the demon giant race, like Ors and Ors Jr., like, that would be, like, the difference. Like, there's normal Sea Kings, then there's, like, the Devil Sea Kings, and that's what these things are. But yeah. These things might be related to so they could either be related to Poseidon as the ancient weapon, if they are, like, sea monsters, like Sea Kings, or they might be related to Uranos, who's the previously unknown ancient weapon. That begs the question, like, where are, like, all the ancient weapons located? Because, obviously, Shirahoshi, she's a mermaid, so she is not in, like, a fixed point. But as for Pluton, and possibly Uranos, they could be, like, in fixed points. And if these things are if these things are the ancient weapon, Uranos, they're kind of in paradise, the side of the New World, so how are they going to get on this side? Something else that Joy Boy touched upon in his video, and something that I really haven't thought much about, maybe I should make a video about it, is the idea that eventually the Red Line is going to be destroyed. The Red Line is going to be crumbled apart. You have the island whales that are, like, smashing against it. Like, eventually the Red Line needs to fall, or at least the part of the Red Line where Marie-Joie is sitting, that needs to collapse. And that just opens up a big opening. And I could see that happening now, because there's a lot of stuff that's still in Paradise that... How is it going to be relevant now that the Straw Hats are in the New World? Well, if the Red Line was just destroyed, and it makes a big gap, and you could just sail from one side to the other, that would solve the problem right there. Because there's a lot of stuff, a lot of people still in the Paradise that I want to see, want to be relevant. So where's this going? As for the nature of these shadows, like what they actually do, we have no idea. It's implied that sometimes ships go missing even before Thriller Bark, and that these things are responsible for them. But plenty of people, like Moria set up his shop for 10 years in Thriller Bark. These things apparently never bothered him. Brook was sailing around the fog for 50 years in the Florian Triangle. These things never really bothered him. He never brought them up. Like, oh yes, by the way, Luffy-san, in the Florian Triangle, there's also these giant monolithic Cthulhu-like creatures. They never brought them up, so maybe he never saw them, or maybe he just saw them the same thing Lola, just like through the fog, just couldn't really get a good glimpse of them, you know? The fog is always so thick in the Florian Triangle. Perona left Thriller Bark, and then she came back to get Kumashi, and then she left again. You know, she wasn't hindered by these things, so it's not like they might not be directly hostile. Maybe it might be a thing like Cthulhu, like they're slumbering or they're inactive until their time is right, or something of that nature. But I just wanted to bring up my thoughts on this, because I think the Godzilla thing, like a race of devastating sea dragons, or like a spin on the Cthulhu mythos, which Oda really hasn't touched upon that much yet, that would be powerful. That would be really devastating, to be like, oh yeah, I'm bringing Cthulhu into One Piece, and there are these great old gods that you just can't kill. Yeah, like these are like the ultimate rulers of this world. Because the whole god thing is also something Oda doesn't really bring up that much. He doesn't really bring up, like, yeah, there's not really gods in the One Piece world, you know what I mean? Well, there's Eneru, but we all know what happened with that. So, gotta see where that's going, you know? Alright, well anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Leave your comments below on what you think these things are, and what you think about my thoughts on it. You know, the Godzilla, Cthulhu thing. What do you think about the ancient weapons? Shirahoshi's boobs. You know, talk about whatever. Thanks, everybody. Tekking101, signing out.